At some point, we need to unify behind our candidate, and I believe that the best candidate is Mitt Romney.
And me, I'm giving some serious consideration to the future. But this I know, we can win in 2016 as a party.
A lot of people thought they could have won in 2012. Well, that first bite was Jeb Bush in 2012, calling Mitt Romney the best candidate in the presidential field. Mitt Romney then this week, keeping the door wide open for a third presidential bid, making the prospect of a head-to-head matchup between the two GOP heavyweights that much more possible and interesting. We're back now with a panel to talk 2016. All right, Juan, you're probably not going to vote for either of those individuals. But what do you make, you know, once Jeb Bush sort of got out there with his announcement, it seems like it's sort of sped up everybody else's timeline about whether they're in or out.
No question about it. And so the game begins, and it's, you know, not only gentlemen start your engines, but I think it's now at the point where it's a primary campaign about money and about donors. And I think that's the real conflict here. So you have to separate out people who are in the top tier. And when it comes to top tier ability to raise money on the Republican side, right now it's Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney. The question for donors, and this week I talked to some donors on the Republican side, they don't feel any passion or reason for Mitt Romney to get back in the game. Friday night, San Diego Republican National Committee winter meeting, he made the case that he now has a new narrative. He thinks that with a strong foreign policy hand, to say the Obama administration has been weak, as we were discussing in the first panel, and more effort in terms of speaking to the middle class about upward mobility, that Mitt Romney can be the best Republican candidate for 16. I'm not sure other Republicans, especially the grassroots, agree.
Well, and neither do some of the people who could possibly be his competitors in 2016. Here are a couple of them weighing in on a possible three-peat.
I do think, though, that the same old has been tried, and if we try the same thing again, we might get the same result.
If we're going to be up against particularly Hillary Clinton, we've got to offer a new, fresh approach, and ideally it's one that comes from the states.
All right, Kimberly, we see there Senator Rand Paul and Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker potentially throwing their hats in the ring as well. So, of course, they are not going to have open arms, essentially, for Mitt Romney returning.
So they're hitting on some of the themes that you are hearing. Look, Romney's out there and he's making his case for why he should do this again. And there are some compelling reasons. He'll say, this is the third time at the rodeo. I understand the mechanics of a presidential race. I'll have donors behind me. Maybe the voters have some buyer's remorse because they went for Obama and should have gone for me. But the fundamental problem for Mitt Romney when he ran both in 2008 and 2012 is he lacked a compelling narrative, a compelling reason for why he was in the race. And a particular anchor on him as well was this question of income inequality and class warfare. And the Republicans understand that the Democrats are gearing up to make that their #1 issue in 2016. And that's what has Republicans worried, is when you listen to Mitt Romney, it's still not clear he has a way to navigate that question. He has any answers for that question. And that is why you see so much pushback on him doing another run.
George, you have a new piece out, and you break down a lot of the mechanics, the electoral votes, where Republicans are, and some questions about whether this is a good idea or not for Mitt Romney to try again.
It's very hard to produce unanimity in American politics, particularly among fractious Republicans, but Mitt Romney this week did so. So far as I can tell, there is no one expressing the desire, this pent-up desire for another Romney campaign. Is the field weak? He doesn't have that excuse. This is probably the strongest, most diverse Republican field since 1856, when there first was a Republican field. Is the party weak? They control 31 governors. 7 of the 10 largest states have Republican governors. They control both legislative chambers and the governorship in 23 states with 251 electoral votes. The Republican Party is geared up for a very strong showing in 2016, and they do not need to look backward.
I have to confess that I didn't think New Jersey Governor Chris Christie was going to get in, and he's certainly not in, but he is doing important meetings with important donors and different people. He gave his State of the State address this week in New Jersey, and he talked about a lot of places outside of New Jersey. He talked about how he's talked with people and they have anxiety and they're worried about jobs and those kinds of things. Here's a bit more of what he said in his State of the State address.
I saw it on the streets of Chicago and felt it in the suburbs of Maryland. I heard it from farmers in Kansas and from teachers in Colorado. I felt it from veterans in Maine and from workers in Arkansas.
Senator, those places aren't inside New Jersey.
You're an astute student of geography.
I'm not great at geography,
Shannon.
but I do know that much.
Well, look, it looks like Governor Christie is going to run. And he, Governor Walker, possibly Marco Rubio is a very talented young man. They're the ones who are most affected by the Romney-Bush challenge because they're really all auditioning to be these more establishment-type candidate. Simultaneously, you have a contest going on to be the more movement candidate. That may be Senator Cruz and Mike Huckabee, possibly Rick Santorum, Rand Paul, who, if I had to bet, would be the last man standing there. And so the real question here is this is shaping up, as George mentioned, this is shaping up as a very close competitive presidential election, I think with a slight advantage to the Democrats because of the bias in the Electoral College, the improving economy, and some demographic changes. If the Republicans don't blow it, however, by getting way, way too far to the right and by having a very nasty, protracted nominating process, you're looking at a 51-49 type election. So the question is, can they go through a very talented, rambunctious field while still trying to observe Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, and that is you run with a positive vision about the future without running down the other Republicans, because one of them is going to be the ultimate standard bearer.
Right, and seemingly to quell a little bit of, or control a little bit of that this week, we see the 9 specific debates that are going to be sanctioned by the RNC and a tightened up calendar that may be aimed at that. Let's talk a little bit about the Democratic side. Hillary Clinton, people are still split. I mean, it seems like she's in, but I hear one from a lot of people say, I'm not sure she's actually going to run. Reince Priebus, head of the RNC, acknowledging this week they've got research opposition teams staked out in Little Rock. They're working on it. Do you think she runs, and is she a lock as a nominee if she does?
I think she's running. I don't see any indication she's not running. I think all of the contrary indications are people who are very enthusiastic about Elizabeth Warren already now. There are people running ads raising money for Elizabeth Warren, but Elizabeth Warren, even in this morning's paper, said she's not running, knows the answer. She wants to be the outsider. But again, we come back to this clear theme, Republican or Democrat. This is a populist campaign about appealing to working class folks. And the question about Hillary Clinton is, was she the New York senator from Wall Street? And if so, does that mean that she really can't be an effective candidate who would stir up the Democratic base? And much we're asking about who is the Republican, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, whoever that can stir up the Republican base.
Well, I want to put up those ads so that people can see them and know what we're talking about here. Out of these full-page ads in New Hampshire saying to Elizabeth Warren, we know you say you're not running, but we really need you. You can see their quote, please run for president. Kimberly, you know, there's an interesting piece in the Washington Post today talking about maybe she's truly not running, but she does want to keep the heat on Hillary Clinton when it comes to issues like Wall Street and those kinds of things.
What we know is that when people say they're not running for president, they're still debating running for president. And Elizabeth Warren knows she has everything on her side at the moment. She'll sit back. This movement is building. They're running ads for her. There's this pent-up belief on the more progressive side of the party that they are the ascendant side of the party. They need someone like Elizabeth Warren to come in. And so she'll sit there and she'll wait until at some point she will probably say, look, I'm needed. I have to come and do this. So I would not count her out at all. There's a real passion for someone like that in the party at the moment.
Quick comments?
Two things, Shannon. I think really what Senator Warren is trying to do is to influence the dialogue and debate.
She already has.
And so she has. And so the question for Mrs. Clinton is, can she capture the passion of the progressives? But even more importantly, can she do enough to avoid a Ralph Nader-like independent candidacy on the left?
All right, we're out of time. We could talk about this for ages, but we only have 2 years to go. Less than 2 years now. All right, thanks, panel. We'll see you next week.